Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Soldera Markets podcast, where we predominantly talk about guarantees of origin and renewable energy credit. But today we are joined by Kevin Lu, who's doing his Fulbright scholarship in Tallinn, in Estonia, and he's investigating the climate tech ecosystem in Estonia. So we thought it would be a great opportunity to showcase what we're doing here at Soldera whilst having a more interactive conversation about climate trends in Europe and Estonia more generally. So Kevin, it's really nice to have you on the show, and yeah, over to you to just do a little bit of an introduction about yourself and how you're finding Estonia so far.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so as Ollie mentioned, I'm a Fulbright scholar and researcher at the Tallinn University of Technology right now. I actually moved from San Francisco to Tallinn here over the last year, and I've been here since September, and it's been a really awesome experience because I just learned so much about kind of the comprehensive climate clean tech ecosystem here. And there's so many interesting developments, not even just from like the founder side, but also from the investment side and also the policy side as well, in terms of like how we can construct a very comprehensive climate tech ecosystem.
Awesome. So why do you choose Estonia more? Was that your initial focus? Did you always want to choose Estonia, or how did that work out?
It was such a funny story because I knew about Estonia in terms of like their Estonia programs and their how digital the society is. And I think that's a narrative that's really commonly kind of put out there in the ecosystem, especially among like startups and founders and entrepreneurs. But I knew for myself that at least in SF, when I was working over there, I was really heavily focused in on like new clean tech developments over there. Working with a lot of different founders over there in that space. And so I wanted to kind of like take that interest and knowledge over to Estonia. And I think there's a really interesting transition period going on right now where it's not just about those digital IT solutions that so many different founders were working on in the past, but now there's a lot of spin-offs and scientific breakthroughs and like labs at universities. And those are becoming kind of this predominant force of clean tech startups that we developed now. So that's something that I've wanted to explore deeper. And that's kind of like what I'm focusing in now.
Yeah, I'll say a quick word about myself as well. I'm Stenver, founder and CEO of Soldera, here to support renewable energy producers, minimize their compliance costs, and maximize their revenue on renewable energy. Very excited to have you here, Kevin, and hear more about your journey. And happy to answer about my journey as well, because you had a lot of questions for both me and Ollie, right?
Yes, yes, of course. Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of like these interviews I'm conducting right now with founders and entrepreneurs in Estonia, they're really focused in on like not only just like their own founder journey, but also what they've been noticing in the space as well. And so I'm trying to identify through these interviews, like, how we can better support like climate entrepreneurs like you, in terms of like what you're building and how we can create better models of and support mechanisms to help accelerate this kind of growth. So, I mean, obviously, we've had context on like, what Soldera is. I've looked through the website as well, but would love to just kind of learn just generally like what's the founding story behind the company and how did you kind of like choose to construct your founding team and all that kind of good stuff.
When we talk about my background, I'm a serial entrepreneur. So I founded many companies. I have a technical background as well. And so I've been, for example, part of Glia, which is a New York based enterprise SaaS business. It's a $1 billion company. But after Glia, when I led the software engineering team there around Series B, I left and founded my own company called eAgronom, which is a leading climate tech company in Central Eastern Europe. They raised close to like 30 million euros by now. And over there, I really got into the environment narrative and angle, like, because in eAgronom, it was all about like how can we secure our soils, help farmers become regenerative, do better, give them better overview, make our food better, and so on. Well, one thing led to another, and very soon within eAgronom, I grew to be from CTO to be the innovation lead. Every new product line it ever did was spearheaded by me and my now co-founder Al. I met Al actually during eAgronom. I had heard that he's really good at like AI and data science. So I met him in a cafe. I sat down next to him and I asked him like, "Hey, can you explain to me how neural networks work?" Well, he opened up a napkin, started drawing neural network paths. I hired him on the spot. Best hire I ever made. He was the best product manager in eAgronom. And at some point inside eAgronom, we together created SolidWorld, which was carbon credit trading platform. Initially, it was supposed to focus on helping eAgronom solve a very specific problem, but we kind of spun it out and took it way beyond that and wanted to create the carbon exchange. When the carbon markets had big downturn roughly 3 or 4 years ago, Then we started looking at what we're doing. We've been growing fast. We had a lot of assets on our platform, multiple millions of dollars running, but the space itself was had a lot of issues, the voluntary carbon space. And eventually, like we were like, okay, like we can create a bootstrap business here, but like we wanted to focus on venture impact because both me and Al want to make sure that we do something that really has a huge impact. So we made the hard decision and decided to pivot. We looked through every environmental asset that was out there. You know, we've been in with Diagnum and with SolidWorld in environmental assets for 10 years now. So we see pretty much everything there. And then our eyes stopped on renewable energy credits or guarantees of origin, as they're called in Europe. And we initially thought that this looks interesting because the market is big, it's regulated, there's no like greenwashing issues, and we can reuse our technology there. Well, we didn't end up reusing any technology, to be honest, but we did reuse the network, the know-how, the knowledge, and we built a completely new technology. And that's how Soldera got started. It's been an amazing journey since then. We already have more than 2,500 power plants we manage, and in a year, and we've grown to 10 people. We've done venture rounds, and yeah.
Mhm. Got it. Yeah, and so I'm very curious. Like, I think of something that I've noticed when I was talking with a lot of Estonian founders here is the fact that they often have to think very internationally because, Estonia is a generally smaller market. So when you were kind of identifying some of those like main customers or users, how did you kind of approach the way that you were able to identify both the problem and were you thinking about the international growth aspect of like the market already? Like, or were you thinking more so like, okay, let's start off on Estonia and then maybe kind of like look towards like bigger visions beyond that?
So I don't know how it is for you, Kevin and Ollie, but in UK and US, but in Estonia, there's a saying that you don't get rich in Estonia. So day one, when you start building something, you're thinking immediately like, how can I make this global? If you can't, then it's, not worth doing, especially in software business, which is usually all about scale. Unless you're solving a very niche problem and you just want to build like a lifestyle business, then you have to think day one how it looks like globally. Like there's only a million Estonians. There's only so much they can do. Anything you build inside Estonia is gonna be very limited by the tiny Estonian market as it is. Day one, global. That's the only way how to do it, and it's all about scale and figuring out like what's the business model that can actually have a big global impact.
Also, the nature of guarantees of origin being an international system, right? And
Yeah.
with the EECS geos in Europe being portable across different geographies, it really doesn't make sense to only stay in one country. And, you would have built out the system for Estonia and then you would have had a lot of free time on your hands, right? So, yeah, I think international was definitely the way to go.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense for sure. And I think it's very always very fascinating, also inspiring to see how people in Estonia just kind of have to think about that in a way. But I think because of that, that's also something that, investors that I've talked with, they're like, that's something I actually appreciate about Estonian founders is the fact that they get the ability to just think internationally from the ground up. And it's like there's not even a question about it. It's already included in the pitches, the decks, like the product roadmap.
It's actually been funny. I've spoken with some other founders and investors in like Poland and Japan and so on, and they often say that the biggest issue they find is that most of the local founders want to stay local. They just, because the market is big enough that you can build a successful business just being in your own country. But when you do like venture investing, you want to look for global businesses that can scale globally. And Estonian's tiny size is both a blessing and a curse in this case, right? Because it really forces us to go outside and figure out like, can I make this into a bigger thing than just an Estonian?
Yeah, that makes sense. And like, can you tell me a little bit more about that fundraising journey that you've gone through so far since like the conception of Soldera and then being able to kind of like navigate through that like fundraising cycle? Like, what are some of the things that you've kind of encountered while going on this fundraising journey?
I raised a lot of capital throughout many different fundraising companies and journeys, right? So, like, overall, the ventures that I've been part of, like, I've raised more than 30 million euros. And I've also been part of like Clia and so on, which have also raised tons of money. So I have seen the journey repeatedly. I've spoken with probably over 1,000 venture capitalists at this point. So over all the 10 years, I think it's pretty well known what makes for a good fundraising story and narrative and how to approach this. What I do see is a lot of newer founders for some reason don't apply these lessons. But I mean, in the internet, all the big important things are written out, right? And in general, like if you have an ambitious plan, great traction, it's not hard to raise money even in the current environment. We, for example, took us 5 weeks to go from zero to closing term sheets and completely oversubscribed. So like, and having to choose like who's going to be like the best partner for us. So like the fundraising journey and the way you do like venture capital fundraising is always like, I think a CEO should do it. You can't outsource it, especially in an early stage venture firm. You have to get your story straight. You must have a good story and narrative. It has to be simple and a high level. And at the same time, it needs to be resilient enough that you can answer any questions that come up. And you just need to go through a lot of numbers, and not stay only in raising in Estonia. Like I remember very early on when we just started e-agronom, then, we went to investors, and this was like 10 years ago. And we asked them like, what's the valuation of e-agronom? And they told us 6 million. Then we went to UK, did a roadshow, and Sweden and Germany and so on, and came back with the term sheet of 10 million. And suddenly all Estonian investors said the valuation is 10 million. It's really like fundraising and investment. Like you got a great competition for your company. It's honestly as simple as that. Because investors are looking for good deals. That's their business, right?
Yeah. Do you think that within Estonia, so you've seen this narrative, you've seen the narrative, common narratives that you have to kind of navigate when fundraising in Estonia, and you also had to, build. You've worked on multiple different kinds of like clean tech companies here. What are some advice that you might have for founders who now want to build in this space in Estonia? Also, like when they have to navigate the fundraising cycle here.
I don't know if there is any unique advice I will give. Like the general startup advice still applies, right? Find a niche, first of all, that is untapped. Validate the niche. Make sure it's actually venture niche. That's very important. Make the decision if you actually want to raise venture capital. That's extremely important. Like you shouldn't always raise money. In fact, like most of the time, you shouldn't raise money. Taking venture capital is double-edged sword. Suddenly you have a clock ticking on your back. And at the same time, you have like as soon as you take money, you have like 5 years to deliver $1 billion business. That's the expectation that you're given. And like that's what investors want from you. You lose control of your company. You don't have like absolute authority anymore what's going on. You need to do reporting. You need to build shareholder relationships. And so you take on a lot of responsibility by taking venture capital. And while it may sound like glamorous and fancy, there's absolutely downsides for it. So, that's the most important decision you can make. As soon as you sell away part of your company, like it's a completely different game than just owning your own business. But if you do decide to go the venture route, or you decide not to, I mean, ultimately what matters is building a good business. That's the most important part. Like you deciding whether to take venture capital or not should only be honestly dictated by one question. Like, can you build $1 billion business like within the next 5 years? If the answer is yes, then maybe venture capital can help you. If the answer is no, and then maybe you shouldn't take investment money.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like, among many different, not even just in Australia, but like climate tech companies around the world, like the way to navigate the fundraising cycle is like any other traditional company. It's always this kind of like essentially the same blueprint. And you still have to, even though you're doing positive, amazing impact for the world, you still have to be able to kind of show investors, yeah, like this is something that will also give you like those financial returns as well.
Maybe for people who are looking to raise, because obviously your initial question was what advice would you give? I think some great insight would be how to choose like the most strategic venture partner, right? Because closing around within 5 weeks with oversubscription interests, then you obviously have to decide between different partners, right? So what were you looking for to really add value to your mission, right?
But there's no one answer fits all here. Every business is different, and you gotta find what's useful for your business. That's fundamentally what entrepreneurship and businesses are. It's finding new niches that nobody has tapped into and exploiting them and bringing solutions that bring value there. That's basically the entire hallmark of entrepreneurship, and you can't like fit it into a box, right? I can't really answer that because you have to figure it out as a CEO of your own company, like what sort of partner brings value to you. If you're a more traditional business with physical goods and supply chains, you maybe need a partner that opens up like critical doors for you and critical supply chain options for you. And you maybe need like a strategic partner. If you're simply super fast growing software tech business, then maybe you just need somebody who has a good name and can help you reach the next stage. In our specific case, we really wanted to have somebody who has entrepreneurial background and can help us navigate and find quickest growth paths possible. It ultimately comes down what your business is, and there's no one size fits all answer over here. So
I was talking recently to a partner of a fund who they have a very dispersed model, so they write lots of very small checks. And he was talking about the benefits and disadvantages of that. One being that if a round is heavily subscribed, you can kind of tag on to the end and like get involved because it's not a lot of money. But also maybe Stenver, you can comment on this. Founders are kind of a little bit more wary when it comes to smaller checks because they want the sort of bigger, like when they set a minimum ticket, they want somebody who can actually apply themselves, bring something more than just capital, give access to network as well, right? And I think that's maybe some of the thought process that you went through.
yeah, to be, completely honest, often like it really depends on what type of a business you are in. If you're in like B2B SaaS business, having a right investor with the right connections can help you open up few right doors and really boost you to the next level. At the same time, like let's say you're a B2C SaaS business, or even if you're a B2B SaaS business, like often the network of the investor gets exhausted quite fast, actually. There's like a limited amount of real support you can help over there. And it's more important, in my opinion, that they have a strong name. They can help in the next fundraising round. That's very important. And also that they're a partner for you. So, as you go through the daily struggles of growing your company, and there's going to be struggles, like it's inevitable. That's what every startup is. You constantly have like this roller coaster. They're the type of investor who's supportive and not destructive in that journey. And I think those are like really, really important things. Our investor actually, I think the way he worded it is that he wants his founders basically be in a room where even if they're like freezing, they can still breathe. So even if it seems like the whole world around them is falling apart, they can still breathe and discuss things and sort of like make sure that you have productive conversations on how to take the company forward and make sure it goes in the right direction.
Yeah, can you tell me a little bit more about maybe some of those challenges that you've encountered when like building the product itself? And like, because I think something that's also been very fascinating is the fact that Soldera is more on like the software side, right? Like it's really software focused, AI and software, but it really still like focuses on like, engaging with real people's lives in terms of like infrastructure and also like development of infrastructure around like multiple different markets. And I think something that's just super fascinating is the fact that, in the climate tech realm in Estonia, there's software, there's hardware, and then there's like software enabled hardware or like come something in more of that gray area. So can you tell me a little bit more about kind of maybe the more technical challenges that you might have encountered when building Soldera as a company?
Well, the key points I'd actually like go to take a few years back, like from my previous company. And this is really when me and Al spun out from eAgronom to SolidWorld. The biggest key lesson for us was that focus is important. Like so easy to get pulled into 10 directions because your clients are asking million features and you have million ideas what to do. And as you get deeper, you see so many opportunities. And what's important is to stay focused, like really figure out like what's your tip of the spear, the most highest impact important activities, and just laser focus on that. Every additional feature is gonna like make it exponentially more complex because it has more connections in the background, how everything pulls together. And eventually, the more complicated your product becomes, the slower your development comes. Because of that, it's better to even say no to some opportunities. It's often better to say no to some opportunities, try to grab every opportunity because like you want to make sure that the time and effort you do put into development really hits the spots, and staying focused on that and rather being 10 times better in one thing than being like 50% better in 10 things. That's not going to move the needle if you're just slightly better than the existing solutions, but you're actually not the best in anything. You really want to be best in one thing, and you want to focus all our effort on that. And that has to be the part where you can basically make the most impact with your business.
I think that's like totally makes sense when you're like trying to navigate building the product that you're now doing. But do you think there's anything like different when you're building software and AI in the climate tech space? Do you think there's anything significantly, any specific nuances that you have to navigate? It's maybe especially if it relates to, understanding the policy landscape, understanding global landscapes in terms of how different countries are navigating like clean energy.
One of the big differences is that it's often expected for you to be perfect. Because like in climate and policy, like if you don't have a perfect solution, everybody says it's greenwashing. So that's sort of something to be just aware of. And as a technical challenge, that just reinforces my point of like be very focused on what you do best, because like you can't be best at everything. And if you need to choose one thing to be perfect within, then make sure you have that very, very well covered. But like when it comes to like other technical challenges like code or whatever, I don't think there's anything like that special or different in clean tech that makes it more technically complex. It's a lot more on business side challenges.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot of more social implications involved in like what you're building now. And it seems like the ability or kind of giving yourself grace in terms of knowing that it won't be perfect on the first try and that it's okay to, like make a couple of mistakes, but to learn along the way. That's how you kind of iterate your product. I mean, yeah, that's like building a startup. It's like never going to be perfect on the first try. But I think it's harder to do that in the climate tech space because it's people expect it to be so like right on the dot. Because if you're selling a product as well and you expect it to be like super, super perfect, because it's something to do with sustainability, I think we need to be able to kind of break down that mindset of like, oh, we need this ASAP, like right now, or else it's like an absolute failure and you'll never be able to recover from that ever again. But we have to be able to kind of just say, it's okay. Like we're learning as we're going.
Exactly. And there's a lot of grants and government board schemes when you're in clean tech or climate tech. So you can actually take a lot of advantage from these, which can maybe even help you avoid raising venture capital. But these are not like, technical challenges. They're all like business challenges, and any compliance reporting that comes with it is just, cost of doing business.
What do you think for Soldera? Like, did Soldera use any of those specific support mechanisms in Estonia? And if so, like, maybe what were some of the most like helpful ones for your company in terms of scaling and growing like the business?
Actually, like a bit tying into the previous question and topic, then one thing I do think is that because sustainability and clean tech has a lot of compliance issues, it's sort of like the perfect use case for LLMs and AI, because LLMs and AI are really good at just filling out all this bureaucratic paperwork. So that's actually something to keep in mind, that we have sort of calculated. We currently are roughly around 10 people, but like if we had to hire all the people to take care of all the work we've automated with AI, we probably need like 20 to 30 people right now. So like we have this saying that we have like 10 full-time people, but 200 AI agents basically doing everything in the background. So that's basically like this industry really benefits in the bureaucratic landscape of the AI innovations.
That's one of the most greatest things that have come out of like, building the business is understanding how to leverage AI to basically help accelerate the stuff that you don't really have to care about, like that's kind of something that's like really a big pain. So can you tell me a little bit more about like you said there were bureaucratic things that they've worked on. Like what are some of those things that like they've helped to automate or like quickly kind of get out of the way?
It's easier to say what they haven't helped, because like they helped in paperwork, in compliance, in integrations, in marketing materials, in sales materials. We're now will soon start leveraging them for calling, in development, software development and coding, in like creating ads and marketing material. They're basically all over the place. Like literally every function has been touched by AI in our firm. So
My God, that's crazy. That's great. And that's honestly, I think that by the end of this, you should definitely have a blueprint of like, here's how to leverage AI to build a climate company. I think that would be such a good, helpful playbook, I think, for like future founders in the space. Honestly, unsolicited advice, probably great content marketing material.
I think the main thing is simply to keep an open mind, follow these channels, like especially like X, for example, formerly Twitter, right? Like there's a lot of these people who are very on top of reporting latest developments there, and then they create threads of all the different solutions that have come to market within the last month or something. And you can take a look and like think about like what could apply to your business. And plus, literally, I think it was 1 month ago or something, we had DeepSeek come out. As soon as it came out, I put it on my own personal laptop. Suddenly, you can run these extremely complicated models and build your own solutions for fraction of the cost of what you had before. So this is really honestly just transformative to how business is done, and the AI will change everything. Like it has now become possible to run and create companies that can become really big but don't actually need like thousands of employees anymore.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. I mean, even when I'm doing my research right now in the climate tech space, because there's so many different people I've been interviewing and talking with, like I have so much information to parse through. But then one day I just sat back and I was like, wait, I should just run this through. Like basically I have this platform called Otter AI, and I've been able to extrapolate so much good data and insights that even I probably couldn't have identified if I had went through and parsed through the data myself. So it's like having that extra buddy, and I think it's just super cool just to see how much time is saved through that process. It's really, really awesome.
I agree. And like in my perfect world, like the way I see Soldera going is that instead of having a massive amount of people where every person does a small paper push from one corner to another in the company, we have sort of like a pretty small, tight team of really top experts. These are well-paid top people who are very open-minded and can really run and use these tools to the maximum. And all the things that otherwise would require hundreds of people are just automated by AI agents.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, so obviously, this is what helps to construct the foundation of how you run your business and how you kind of like manage the team on a day-to-day basis. But I'm very curious about just the company's like maybe business model, and also just like around that business model that you have right now, do any like you have to navigate it through specific like environmental regulations or policies? And if so, like what are some of those things that you have, like specific policies that you have to kind of like work with right now in the current like European landscape, or maybe into the future as well?
Well, in our case, our solution basically costs precisely as much value we bring to the producer. So the way it works, right, is that we automate entire compliance, and then we also help them to monetize and maximize revenue in the sales of the renewable energy. And we just get a percentage fee from the sales. So in effect, the more value we bring and the more money they make, the more money we make. And the bigger they are, the more we get. So it's like a very fair compensation, and it's that has worked really well for us. In a nutshell, we take 10 to 30% of trading fees from our producers, like depending on their size. If they're really small rooftop solar, we get 30%. If a huge production conglomerate, we get 10%, and that works well. But in our case, we are in the compliance market. Like a big part of our solution is compliance automation. So you're asking like, how do the environmental regulations and policies affect our business? Well, it is our business. so so basically, in some sense, the existence of these policies has actually enabled our business. There is like a big chunk of like private market as well. Like when we talk about the global IREC market and so on, a lot of it is driven by purely private interests and like environmental goals that the corporates have towards their shareholders. But at the same time, like why European guarantee of origin market is the most mature of the REC market is because of the environmental regulations and policies that are across Europe as well. The way we see it is that sort of a lot of these environmental problems that are coming up across EU and the world, we are looking currently at India and US and UK as well, for example. They are often set by some bureaucrat in an office. They write down some law, how something should happen. And they don't really think about how people actually and companies and corporates should actually comply with these regulations. And they often create like disproportionate amount of unreasonable paperwork, and the adoption of that paperwork is quite uneven in its effectiveness. But by us bringing fully automated solution that just does all the work for all the parties in the system, so like they can literally forget about what's going on there, then it doesn't really impact them at that much. And that's one of the biggest values you can bring to the business. You just remove the headache from them, you remove the entire compliance part, and it's just
Mm.
fully automated. And that's how we see it. We're just taking these compliance issues and fully automating them for the producers of renewable energy.
Yeah. So just adding on to that, like that would be the legal standing of each nation where the GEOs are being issued, and they would have ratified the sort of European AIB compliance requirements into their own law, and they have their own registries. So it's a very complex local process that needs to be done. But I think also something really important to mention is how much the business is impacted by high level European regulatory requirements, because obviously with GEOs being an environmental asset class, as the price of geos changes, the complete outlook of the business changes quite drastically, right? So that's a really interesting thing. And overall, we're quite bullish on the outlook of guarantees of origin. So I think that's another factor to consider.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, Oliver had to call a lot these registries lately and talk with them and get the feeling of the different implementations of the same EU directive in each country.
Yeah.
And
I saw a great quote on LinkedIn. It was like, it's a standard instrument, but just like with custom implementation. So technically everybody should be doing roughly the same thing, but there's just these little niche tweaks that you have to get your head around with each country.
yeah, and imagine you're a huge multinational energy firm, you produce in like 15 countries. Suddenly you need to learn the laws of 15 countries. It's a lot of overhead. It's not efficient at all. It's completely understandable that companies are kind of frustrated and doing the bare minimum to simply get it done. And they can benefit from automated tool that just do it for them, and so they don't need to think about it.
Yeah, that's actually really so cool to hear that these policies create this very awesome tailwind for you to kind of like for businesses to come out of it. So I mean, as a result, like policies create economic opportunity, which is I think something that I think more countries need to kind of like realize and understand. Yeah, like what are some things that you've noticed in Estonia's like climate tech sector as a result of these different kinds of like policies? At least something that I've noticed is the fact that like with each entrepreneur I'm talking with who's working in a different like sector of climate, they always mention a specific policy that helped to drive their business forward. So yeah, like what are some things that you might have noticed over time as a, like just from like a general point of view of the ecosystem? Like what are some things that you've kind of observed changed in the last couple of years?
Well, I think one big thing that has changed, and I agree with it on a personal level a lot, is that a lot of companies have gotten tired of the level of policies and regulations affecting them. And a lot of businesses are actually moving out of EU or their local countries if the policies are too strong. So has especially lately been a very strong wind across Europe that we should simplify, and we should make sure we're not hurting our own internal competition. And I mean, you don't only see it in the EU. The US, of course, obviously is going through the same phase with the deregulation with Doge, or Argentina and so on. So this happens all over the world. And honestly, I think it needs to happen because the bureaucratic machine has the tendency to just sort of grow uncontrollably, and definitely not everything they've done is good. So like we need to sort of pull back a bit and reassess if everything we actually decided is good or not. Even though like our business relies a lot on automating the policy, that's not the only value proposition we have, right? We also maximize on the revenue part. And we are like true believers that we shouldn't make our companies suffer, and we shouldn't force too much policy on them. We should in fact help them to be more competitive, and the policies we are creating should be there to defend and help them to grow better and protect them from the outside influence, essentially. So like I do think that a lot of policies, like whenever we do make these policies, we need to make sure it's not hurting our internal market more than the external market outside of the EU. and we need to be like protective of our own industries as well.
I think ever since I moved here to Tallinn, like one thing that I just got so much more in this like rabbit hole of like, yeah, like what does the future of Europe's like startup ecosystem in general, not even just climate tech, but just like startups in general, like what does the future kind of look like? And there's just so many conversations around like, is this because of like the new administration in the United States, like, is there an opportunity for Europe to really kind of like create some sort of like it could be a policy model or it could be just some sort of way to help better support these companies while still simultaneously being able to create positive like social outcomes by being able to protect people, by being able to create like a social safety net, but also being able to still keep some of those sustainability standards that they've done so well in place, because that in itself, it kind of creates like a buffer the rest of the world, because it kind of signals to the rest of the world that, hey, like this is something that really still does matter and we're a region that really cares about it. Actually, a big reason why like I even like wanted to come to Estonia in the first place was the fact that like, yeah, like they've been able to remove so many different kinds of like regulatory policies over here and be able to create like that digital society, but simultaneously it also still aligns with like sustainability standards. So I'm wondering if that kind of like mindset or like model that they've created can be applied to the rest of Europe as well.
And I think that's a great example because the Estonian government is a massive support for businesses. You can open a company online in like a few minutes. You can access like every single government service online. You never need to visit any like government offices. These are the good types of policies. These are the supportive ones. And these are really like, how can we help our companies thrive and move forward faster? And I think this is also like great inspiration we can bring to the rest of the Europe as well. Yeah, agree with you.
Is it worth mentioning the specifics of grants that were received by Soldera? There are a few from, was it EU climate or energy particular grants?
Yeah, there's a couple of good grants. Like we were part of Green Accelerator, we were part of Energy Beam of the Beamline Foundation, and these grants are always very nice if they happen. But I am a strong believer that every business should be able to drive without grants, and grants should be there as only like an accelerator and help drive even faster, essentially. So I think that's very important part when like building up these grants.
I will say I think Beamline is doing a good job. I had an early start this morning. I joined a Beamline go-to-market strategy consultation, and I found it really valuable. And I think if that's the kind of stuff that's being offered to startups in Estonia, then I think, yeah, that's definitely a model that should be replicated elsewhere. I'm curious, it was all like energy companies, so that specific batch is about energy. Do you think there's a disproportionate amount of energy startups in Estonia or in Tartu, or was that just this batch is like an energy focused one?
This particular grant and batch just focuses on energy. There's like other sectors as well. There's many different types of grant schemes going on.
Yeah, I think the Green Accelerator right now also does like, I think they're launching one soon about forest and biodiversity. There's one focused on that, and I think there's also another one focused in on like I think it was circular economy as well. There's multiple different avenues, and I think they're starting to not just focus it, at least from my own observations. I saw that a lot of like accelerator programs kind of started off as like quote unquote deep tech, but deep tech not just doesn't encompass just climate, it also encompasses like health and biotech and many of like really hardware based solutions. But then I think now I'm starting to see like they've kind of split off into very more granular topic areas, and that's kind of as a result of the fact that there were more climate tech startups being developed in the country, and the fact that if you want to create a very successful outcome for your clients, essentially you want to be able to create very tailored programs for the specific companies. So yeah, I think it's not even just clean energy now. It's also like there's, the other accelerators that I mentioned as well. Yeah. I think one last thing I kind of wanted to ask you though, just like wanted to cover ground is like, like we've kind of covered like the EU, Estonia as well. And they're both, there's obviously areas for improvement, but I'm just very curious, like in the context of Estonia itself, there's a lot of support mechanisms, there's a lot of grants, there's a lot of consultation programs, but in your opinion, like what is something that Estonia could be doing to kind of improve the way that we can build new climate companies in the country? Or what are some ways that they can better support current existing climate companies?
I think Estonia has a great reputation of like being a startup ecosystem and a good tax system. I think they shouldn't do the tax changes they're planning to do, because a lot of that reputation is starting to give back dividends. And we want to give like this perspective of stability, that this is how it is here. Just let the reputation building keep going and doing itself. Like, I mean, I've traveled the world in like Dubai, US, Brazil, it doesn't matter. Everybody knows about Estonia. It's a great place to do business. I know a lot of founders and investors who are considering moving their funds and companies to Estonia. We shouldn't ruin that. We should just keep doing what we've been doing and let the system sort of take care of itself. So I think it's not even like climate specific, but actually like in general Estonian ecosystem. Just let it drive. Don't put too much effort into trying to bring changes. And I mean, of course, there are small things that can be improved here and there, but in general, Estonia has put a lot of effort into building this ecosystem, and just keep watering it and let it keep on growing. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, I think the marketing around or the narratives that were created by the government around Estonian business opportunities has been very prominent. So, like, I mean, even when I first landed in Tallinn, like, and I was walking out, I just saw all these different like posters, kind of just about kind of heavily hinting at that. And I think the more that I talk with like these different kinds of companies, the more I realize like, oh my goodness, like this is a real thing, and we should really kind of dive into the fact that this is such a huge selling point for the country, while simultaneously also noting that yeah, like we can do business in a very like impactful way here, and you can build really like game changing like industry defining companies that can also help to change the world and help to protect our planet as well simultaneously. And I think that is something that I think maybe like Estonia or the Enterprise Estonia division can also like look into, is like knowing that you can actually have the best of both worlds by knowing that we can create really impactful policies while simultaneously also protecting our businesses.
And, just encourage people to take risk. I think it's a cultural thing, more risk taking, more entrepreneurship, more international attention. That's all we need.
But I think on that point, I think people need to understand that for a lot of people looking inwards to Estonia, moving a business to Estonia or moving a fund to Estonia or relocating to Estonia is a risk, right? So for them, at least at a high level. So Stenver, would you be in favor of something like a golden visa scenario, like an investor visa, where like if you make that effort, you might get an ability to integrate into Estonian society more, like a residency or something? I don't think that's currently possible, but I'm curious about what your thoughts on that would be.
Yeah, it's a good question. I haven't thought about that, but I mean, you can already get residence and start the company without ever coming to Estonia. So that's pretty nice, right? And like you can sort of start testing the waters and see if you like it pretty easy. There's bunch of online services that specialize on these types of companies like Solo, and make it super easy and take care of all your accounting and bookkeeping. And I actually don't know what the Estonian stance on golden visa programs are. I mean, I'm always supportive in those. Like, it sounds like a no-brainer to me.
I will say, I do think that, I mean, yeah, so they also have the digital residency program, so that's really prominent here that they always often talk about. But I think this is something that I would think that would be even better, I think, for the ecosystem. Like, there are a good amount of like, tech events being hosted around like Tallinn as well. But I think that back when I was in SF, like it was every single like day, every single day, there was always some major event around the city that you can go to, and it's for free. It's like for open. It's like, and I think that in itself was why SF was such a prominent tech hub. Not because like, I mean, obviously they're doing really awesome work, but it's like the fact that I'm also here in Estonia. I'm like, everyone's doing also really awesome work here. But I think that community building aspect could be something that would take the country to the next level. Not even just like, oh, among like, Estonian founders, but just inviting people from outside of the country to come visit and to kind of just see like all the different opportunities being offered here. Yeah, once you get that exposure and you like, find a community of like really awesome people, it's like, I would say it's kind of like you're trapped in a way. Mentally, you're like trapped in because you're like, wow, like there's just a lot of awesome things here. And I know that whenever I leave Estonia this coming July, like it's something that's always going to be a part of me in terms of like, okay, like this is something that's always going to be on top of my mind in some shape or.
But most of these events in SF are driven by private people. So Kevin, you have the honor and opportunity to start your own event series here in Tallinn.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I'm already talking with some people actually thinking about it as well, at least from the university level, trying to see it as well. So yeah, I think a little bit more of that would be really awesome to look into.
All right, guys, it's been a cool conversation, and thank you so much, Kevin, for coming here. And asking the questions and sharing your experience. And thank you, Ollie, for giving your insights. We'll see you guys soon.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah. Thank you all. This is super awesome.